So when Tumblr was first like a thing, I was writing things on Tumblr, and also many people were making GIFs of my weirdest porn scene faces. And I almost retired. I was so mortified. I was like, oh my God, I do what? And it's one thing like in a video to
When
see
it's
a really intense face and then move on from it. But when it's in a loop, it really kind of warps your perspective on it. And I was like, maybe I should just stop. Like I should, but no, it turns out they were making these GIFs in like celebration. And I was like, oh.
oh.
And that day, the last shreds of self-consciousness fell away.
I was like imagining some of those gifs in my mind of what both of our faces do. And I'm like, oh, there during the Tumblr golden era, that must have been intense.
I also, years later, man claiming to have been a former Tumblr employee, and his wife, who claimed to be a current Tumblr server person, like taking care of the servers, came up to me at a convention. And the man was like, did you know you're the reason we got rid of the sexuality category? And I was like,
what?
Yeah, I was like, no, I didn't know that. So when I'd started writing, I applied to be listed in the sexuality category. There were like maybe 20 Tumblrs listed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I applied, and I wasn't posting porn.
Right.
I was writing about my experiences in porn. And the same, yeah, I might describe something bluntly, but it had much more in common with journalism than it did, or memoir, than it did with erotica.
Well, like on one hand, I'm kind of like, okay, I want to reassure you, you didn't ruin it just by existing and being you. I'm like, that was their decision. I'm just like, but also that's interesting from an audience perspective, because what occurred in my brain as you were talking was I was like, oh, maybe they didn't know how to categorize it because they didn't know how they should be telling the audience to relate to you. Because there's a difference of whether are you relating to it as erotica, are you relating to it as memoir, are you relating to it as education, are you relating to it to be like turned on? Like, what's the relationship? And I was like, oh, if they're trying to label it one way and those are actually multiple labels and they don't know how to define that relationship, they were like, no relationship.
Yeah, none. No relationship for anyone. Sex,
exactly.
but sex.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was like, that's so strange. And like thinking about when people create like GIFs of your face, that I was like, even that is in a way like forming a relationship with you.
Which brings us to our subject for the episode: parasociality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, can we get a definition of parasociality just to like know what the sandbox is?
I was like, ooh, now I'm curious what your definition is, because I was like, I can say mine and you can say yours, and then we will see where they overlap. Because like, parasocial for me is when people form a one-way relationship with someone based upon their media output or based upon an impression that they might have of them, or even it can be like stories about a friend that another friend has told you and you form like an attachment or a relationship to that person. where basically it's a unidirectional thing, and the person might be aware of it, they might not be aware of it. And like with media, we purposely foster parasocial relationships. Like that's what we do, but then the thing that people know about us is simply what we choose to put out in our media.
So parasocial to me, I feel like there's a kind of a gray zone of like seepage around it where it doesn't, you've got parasocial here,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got like direct relationships, but there's kind of this blurry zone in the middle where you that's where you live if you do OnlyFans and
Mm.
are, communicating with customers about things that they might want to have in a custom video.
Right.
Or, when I was doing OnlyFans, actually, a lot of my day was spent messaging about nerd stuff, politics, Serbia, and this is not unique to me. I ended up with subscribers who were people that I had met on several occasions and shaken
Right.
hands with. And then when they found that I had an OnlyFans, they were like, "Is it weird if I join?" And I'm like, "No, just, keep it within, keep the communication within the bounds of what's allowed on the platform."
Yeah.
And so I think I have a slightly wider definition of it than you have, or at least like an adjunct of.
Yes.
There's also this like, because we do often in today's media landscape, social media landscape, we're often interacting with people,
Yes.
but in a way that is appropriate for the situation.
Right. And it also sounds like some of the people that you're talking about are people with whom you might have a casual, it sounds almost like a casual kind of friendship or acquaintanceship with anyway, like outside of your role as, like, say, running an OnlyFans and putting out content. But like there are some people that, like, even outside of that kind of relationship, you'd be like, oh yeah, like I would chat with this person every so often. But like,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's interesting to think that because of the structure of it, like there is almost that boundary of, oh, but it stays within this ecosystem. Like I think about, even the idea of, I remember talking to the artist Sandra Larque about this in an interview for Why Not Both, where he was talking about like why not to date fans basically. And what he said was, he was like, there's always an inherent like power dynamic to that he's like, someone knows so much about you ostensibly through your art, but they don't really know you because they've interacted with your art, not like you as a person on like, like an everyday basis, but that they have this image of you. And so you have more power in that situation because like you're kind of this idealized person to them. And I was like, oh, that's interesting to think about, like being careful with making sure that you aren't interacting with someone as like your avatar that they have of you. Uh, I'm still mulling it over in my head.
See, I would argue that everyone builds an avatar of you, especially like it's not that the whole world knows who I am, but in the sex positive kind of spaces that I prefer to date in,
Right.
they might not have seen my work, but the name Stoya rings a bell. They might not have read anything I've written, but they're like at least vaguely aware of the existence of me. And so then when they meet me or match with me or whatever, regardless of whether they go and Google me or not,
Right.
they already start imagining all of these things. And then I think about when I meet people who are, totally private people, but they tell me a biographical detail, and I also start building a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think about the way that also I just had a great case consult with a potential new client, and what we were talking about is also sometimes that when there's like scarcity, so not necessarily like manufactured scarcity, but just like situational scarcity, like you only see someone every few months because of like scheduling things or distance or things like that, that like especially with a neurodivergent brain, we just try and fill in all of those gaps with like all of the pattern recognition that we have. And like we construct this person. And then we might have like every few months an intense interaction with this person that matches up or doesn't match up. But it's like when we're given that space, and I feel like also like OnlyFans or putting out music or like putting out podcasts, it gives you actually some of that space. And then people naturally want to fill in that space in their head.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about, oh, like what happens when you do fill it in almost accurately, but then I was like, oh, what happens if you fill it in like really inaccurately?
Yeah.
Like,
And so once again, I'm just Jessica doing a Jessica here. We talk about these things as parasocial and social as though they're two discrete categories, but it's not binary and it's not that simple, and it's a lot sloppier and more mixed up. And when you look at one end of things and the other end of things, you can learn things about each from the other.
like I'm curious, with your experience, do you find that there's a certain kind of person that forms a stronger parasocial relationship than not?
Off the cuff, I'm going to say there's about 8 different kinds of people. Uh, Awkward nerd boys, who, by the way, they're usually about my age, and they're the kind of boys who would not do fun nerd things with me when we were in, school, because they were afraid. And you
Oh.
know now so it's also like sort of nice for me. I'm like, oh, you want to tell me about your Dungeons and Dragons game? That's very exciting. um Neurodivergent women,
Yep.
it got to the point where if a woman comes up to me and says that she liked my book, I just ask if she has ADHD, and it's almost always a yes.
Well,
If they
yeah,
like my
reading
book enough to show up. Sorry, I cut
reading
you off.
reading your book was basically like, whomst is this with my inner monologue but different life experience? Like,
And they're always like, how did you know? And I'm like, well, if you enjoyed this particular work of writing enough to come physically to where I am and tell me you liked it, odds are.
chances are good.
Yeah.
Like,
um men of a certain age who are, in their like late 50s, early 60s, who just think I'm such a, classic beauty kind of gal, and remind them of the old days because I'm so classy and polished, which I find
that's
very entertaining.
fascinating. I'm so sorry to be like making faces at you of quoi. Go on.
Yeah, it's wild to me because I'm like, I am so redneck and so abrasive. Like,
I was like, we became friends because you yelled friendship at me.
yeah.
Which was great, by the way. I think that's how more people should become friends. So they
He
think you
has
are a polished, sophisticated lady.
right, like, through no effort of my own. Um, Serbs, just broadly speaking, um, some do not like me quite vocally in the comment section on the internet. But generally they're like, she's part Serbian, and they're
Great.
just happy. Um, Sorry.
I feel like we're opening presents on the nights of Hanukkah, and I'm like, all right, we got to night 4. What are we getting for night
Yeah.
5?
No,
Like...
I'm not drawing a complete blank. There's also there's the guys, and this is every single person I know who does public facing sexuality labor gets these guys, and they really should be in therapy. They really should be doing this kind of, sharing and introspection and asking for guidance with a trained therapist, but they don't want to do that.
Right.
They'd rather
Right.
pay just as much money or maybe more to a pretty girl with her tits out, as Rain DeGray described it, to have the same vulnerability and
Right.
request for acceptance and encouragement and all of that. And it's a really dodgy situation, right? Nobody except the guys thinks they're happy with this situation.
Right.
Like therapists are like, that seems like a lot for you. And the workers were like, we're
Yeah.
not trained for this, right? Like there
Right.
are people who've studied this for a long time. Now I'm sort of in a gray zone with the coaching where I'm like, I am a little bit trained, but there's also lots of stuff where I'm going to say, yeah, I can't really do anything for you here except ask for referrals in your area.
You're like, yep, that one is outside my scope.
Yes. Like I have a scope and that's not it.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, women who project all sort of like, you badass boss babe, make that money, fill up your bank account. And I'm like, I lost like tens of thousands of dollars on my big attempt to like build a business in the adult industry space, right? Like a standalone, like a web
Yes.
portal that wasn't like
Yes.
completely focused on me. But no, they just, and I often don't feel like disillusioning them.
Right.
Right. And like clearly, like whatever mythology you've built up about me that has nothing to do with me or anything I've ever said in public
Right.
does something for them. And so I'm like, I don't want to like take it away from them.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. That was 6.
Okay, we got 6 nights of Hanukkah. We're getting close. But what you said really, that sparked a lot in me of like, I was thinking about like why people form these relationships, and like especially when you said like the neurodivergent women one, it's like, okay, like we want to see ourselves reflected in other people, like we want to know we're not alone in this experience. And so witnessing someone else's experience that resonates with us can make us feel close to that person because we feel understood. And I was like, oh, also it could be that it's like what we want to be. And so by perceiving you as this like boss bitch, like badass, it's that someone wants to be that, but they need to see that out in the world. So they're like, oh, see, there it is. Okay, now I know it's possible. Maybe I can do that too.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, because yeah, I've had the same thing where people perceive like especially my therapy business, people are like, oh my God, like, you have so many people on your team. And like I was at an event and someone introduced me as like one of the leading sex therapists in LA. And I had a moment of like internal like imposter panic, because immediately all my brain pulled up was like all of my friends who have more experience in letters after their name than me. Then I'm like, no, they're the premier sex therapists. It is not me. Are you mistaking me? And I literally blurted out, are you mistaking me for someone else?
Yeah. I felt really bad about not even breaking even. And then someone was like, well, what was like the main goal when you set out? And I was like, oh, to kind of, re-expand the idea of what porn can be and demonstrate ethical principles that I've, you know, seen as possibly useful. Um, and they were like, okay, did it do that? And I'm like, well, actually, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
this is like, oh, it's not a failure according to what I set out to do. It's just a
Right.
failure according to like economics. But you know, I was gonna ask what kinds of parasocial relationships you see popping up in your various facets that you put online.
Endeavors.
Yeah,
I do see with and I've heard this from other musicians and I do appreciate it, but it's difficult to know like how much to engage with like because, music does tap into emotions. People will sometimes write extremely personal things to you. Or assume that you'll understand very personal things about them because something in your music has resonated with them. And I try to be really respectful and hold other people's emotions in high regard, but also like I don't have context for them because like it's not someone I know. And also like I have found that if I chat more than kind of perfunctorily, people think that like we are friends, but I don't actually know them. And so then I feel a lot of pressure to be like, oh, how would I show up for a person that I don't really know? So I kind of avoid that by being like, well, I don't think I should be showing up in that way for someone I don't know. It kind of taps on what like Chapel Roan was talking about of, just because you see someone perform or just because you find something in their art that resonates with you, that doesn't mean that you know that person. And that doesn't mean that that person is necessarily the right person to hold your emotions about something or hold your stories about something.
yeah.
And so I do really like in a way, I guess it is parasocial of like when people use my music for like their ritual videos. So that's really cool. Like when I see people being like, "Oh, I'm going to use this in my spell work," and I encourage people to do that. I'm just like, "Oh, hell yeah!" Like, I'm like, and I'll encourage people to like kind of join in on like spell work that I'm doing. And so like I really like that kind of aspect of it. I like when people comment about like what they're reading, about what they're you know that something taps into an emotion that they had. But I do have a hard time when people are like, and it sounds actually similar to like the OnlyFans thing where people are like, let me tell you like my deepest, darkest secret because I feel that level of vulnerability with you. And you're like, I want to honor that vulnerability, but you're also like, oh no, I don't know if this is the correct place for that. Not because I'm judging you, but just because I don't think I have the capacity or rapport with you to be able to meet you at that level.
I have three people that I chat with all day. Um, okay, four. My best friend Ash. Um, he and I's mutual friend Comas. Lydia, my operations manager slash godmother, and you.
Yep.
And that's everyone else. It's like if we're doing a thing, whether it's a project or like gonna meet up, then yeah, there's a lot of communication. Otherwise, like we might have like a flurry of exchanges, once a week or even less frequently. And then, maybe a big marathon phone call catch up like every few months.
Yes.
And
Yes.
sometimes, especially with OnlyFans, but also sometimes on Instagram, it's like just by like acknowledging a message, then it turns into this like they want to chat like all day. And it's like, okay, look,
Yes.
you're lonely and you need a friend. And I cannot be
Yes.
your friend because I have too many activities on my plate, like too many obligations.
Yes. It's extremely that, and that's why sometimes I feel bad when I either ignore a message or if I, say thank you or I acknowledge something but then don't continue the conversation, but I do feel bad. It's like then, you look at your phone and there's hundreds of notifications and you're like, "Oof." Cuz yeah, like I similarly it's like there's my partner human, there's you. There's two friends in a group chat that like we chat all the time. Um And it's like almost like it's like and I feel bad saying it's like the inner circle, but it's like I can only interface regularly with so many people. Otherwise, I would just be like texting and DMing with people all day and I wouldn't get anything else done. Like nothing else
Uh-huh.
would occur. And so I'm like, there's only so many people. Like, yeah, it's literally I'm going through my roster and I'm like, yeah, it's under 10 people. And those are the people I talk to pretty much like every day. And other than that, it's kind of like I feel bad being like, and then there's everyone else. Like,
But it's also that's the reality of time and energy being finite resources.
yes. Yes. And like, and I don't know if you experience this, but like occasionally I experience like communication burnout and it kind of taps into have we talked at all about like pathological demand avoidance slash persistent demand for autonomy? Okay, so PDA, which the reason why it has two names is that one was made by allistic people and the other was made by autistic people. And guess which is more generous to our internal experience?
I think I have an inkling.
Beleaguered laughing continues. But basically, it refers to that we do yearn for autonomy and that oftentimes we so frequently have to override what actually feels comfortable for us that we basically have a fight or flight response. Like we do have a nervous system response to something that we perceive as an external or internal demand. Because then we're like, wait, do I have to override? Will someone else override? Will I override actually myself, how I feel? And so it can like, it's that feeling of, you know, when like, say you're doing the dishes and someone comes up and says, "Oh, great. Can you do the dishes? Like, are you gonna finish the dishes?" Like, and all of a sudden your brain just goes, "No, I will never do another dish. I might throw this one on the ground."
I am very familiar with that feeling.
Yep. And I get that feeling sometimes, unfortunately, when I get flooded with communication, where I'm just like, the moment I see a text message from someone that is not within that circle, or like I get an email, more often than not, my initial response is like, fling the phone into the sea.
Mhm.
Like, because then I'm like, how long will I be obligated to talk to this person? How long will the conversation be? How much energy do I have to put into this? Will I then get carried away and spend all of my energy on this? And whoops, there went my energy. Like, but it's like all that. And so that's what informs my initial, like, no. And then I have to check in with myself after the initial no and be like, okay, like, do I actually have time for this? How do I schedule this? Because, like, that's what I do is I schedule communication times to deal with that. Because otherwise, my brain is like, either for whatever reason, it's decided that communication is great that in that moment, or more often than not, it's like, absolutely not.
Mhm.
So that can be very disruptive to communication habits with literally anyone except for the 10 people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because it's also the big question is like, how much is this communication going to take out of me? And with an unknown person, you don't know, right? You
Yes.
don't know. Is it going to be a reciprocal exchange? Are you going to walk away as full as you showed up? Or is it going to basically suck the life out of you so you're exhausted for the next 3 days?
Yep.
And with people that are close, you obviously, by virtue of knowing them well, you you know you know what's going to happen. Yeah.
And I also and I feel very fortunate for this. Like the people that are in that circle for me, everyone, including you, is very good at being like, hello, this is what I am presenting to you. So that I then can be like, this is a good time to present this to me, and I'm so available. Or I can be like, I see what you are presenting. I respect and love you. I do not have the capacity to hold this in this moment, but here are some moments where I will likely have more capacity.
Yes, yeah.
Like,
That, and also because you've done that, or I've done that, we can feel secure in our assumption that the other person will actually fucking listen. Which
Yes.
is,
Yes.
yeah, not a guarantee with an unknown person.
Yes. Yes. And that it's established of like, oh, like you respect my yes and my no, so they are meaningful. Whereas with someone unknown, I don't know if I am going to be heard in that way. And also I know my own tendency to override my own no, because I can tell someone is needing more of a yes. And so I'll be like, "Oh, I can talk for a little longer. I can do that a little more. I can respond to a few more messages, or like I can do that." And then like you said, then after it's, I've done it to myself, and that's why it's so challenging when I feel that no, because some of it is sometimes inherent distrust of myself, that I'll go past my own bounds. And I'm just like, oh, don't do it. Don't do it. Like, I feel like I've gotten better at that over time, but it was something I wasn't aware of for a long time, that I would avoid things because I didn't trust myself to know when to put a limit on it.
Yeah, and also people have a unique way of sort of messily dumping things in text message, where in a voice conversation you can interrupt for clarification, but and in like an email or an essay there's more care taken. But the
Yes.
medium of text message, when people go medium length or longer, it's almost always a disaster.
Yeah.
And then it's like, fuck, I have to read all, and I have no idea what's going on. I'm so confused, but I'm afraid to ask for clarification because I might get another 15 paragraphs. And
It's very that, and like that's a friend of mine was saying that's why he doesn't like sending voice notes, is that he likes listening to voice notes. That in fact he likes it when I send him voice notes, he said, because he's like I can usually hear your tone pretty well when you're texting. He said, but it's just delightful hearing you like narrate things. I was like, oh, thanks. I am a delight. But he then has trouble sending voice notes back because of exactly what you just said, where he's like, sometimes he's like, I realize when I'm telling a story, he's like, I am looking for that social cue back of like, oh, that emotional beat landed, or oh, something needs clarification, or oh, that resonated, or oh, and he's like, when I'm just voice noting, he's like, I don't know how to do that. I was like, that's really interesting. And also to put the care into that. Whereas when people are projecting onto you in a way, which we all do, but when you're more in the projection than in the interaction, some people don't mind that you don't understand or you aren't interacting. They're just kind of like,
yeah.
Because the same thing happened also with like the Why Not Both podcast. And then I'm going to assume that it is likely going to happen with this, is that because there are resonances with people, yet again, it's like, I'm so excited to like answer people's questions about these topics and about, sharing information and resources. But just because we have these similarities doesn't mean we are the same person or have the same experiences throughout our lives.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting when people have spoken to me as though they know me. And I'm like, "Oh, you know this part of me. Oh, yes, that is a valid part of me, but it is part of the constellation that is vast."
Which also kind of brings up for me the question of like, do we ever, regardless of how close, truly get to know all of a person? And I don't think that's the case. I think we can get to know significant chunks of a person and kind of have an idea of like the shape of where those chunks are and how they interact with each other. But there's always going to be these like big things where it's like, I'm sorry, you did what in your 20s? Like, you were what? Like, You studied what for 6 years? Like what?
I do feel that way, and I feel like, that's why it's important for me to see people in different contexts. Like, especially when I'm getting to know someone, like, and I know that people are like, oh, you shouldn't meet like the person you're dating's friends too early, like things like that, like from an attachment perspective. And I totally get that. But I like seeing like people that I'm dating or people that I'm friends with. I want to see how they act around other people, because
Mhm.
anyone can mirror me if they really want to. Anyone can be like super chill with me for a limited duration of time. Most people crack after a while. Not that people are like cruel to me, but it's like people can keep up an act for like usually about 3 months of like, behold all of my good traits. And I'm like, no,
Yes.
I want to see the bad ones. I want to see the weird ones. I want to see the goblin. Like, because I want to see you in different contexts, because that also informs me of, once the novelty of me has worn off, how do you treat people? How do you interact in the world? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And like, I find that that can be really challenging, because otherwise then you form this image of this person in one context. And then you see them in another and you're like,
Oh, and we're back to the images we form.
yes.
Sometimes when people talk about fans, it's this like, like there's some sort of like elevation of the one person, and like pushing down of the people who are appreciative of that person. But it can be a little awkward at first. So I often interview people, or
Oh.
like on Blue Sky, when there was this huge influx of users, I posted a few times over the space of several days, like, hey, here's what I'm up to in life right now. Please introduce yourselves, because
Yeah.
like it doesn't have to be this like, me engaging with the other large follower count profiles, and a like faceless sea of people just liking things, right? Like we can like
Yeah.
get to know each other. And sure enough, a lot of them, I'm like, oh, you're so cool. I'm going to follow you because I want to keep track of your like super obscure and fascinating thesis that you're working on, or like whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That also seems to cross over with the neurodivergence that you mentioned, that I do wonder about that too. Like, even thinking of like fandoms in general, and I want to query Lori about this on another episode, about like why neurodivergent people are so drawn to fandoms, because in a way that is a parasocial relationship potentially to the media itself, but then they form a community around it, that like, it's not that the original media is extraneous, like it's still the focus of it, but it forms a community that may or may not even hinge on the original source material. I just referred to people as source material, but here we are.
I
Like,
yeah, I am both human and sometimes source material.
why do you feel that there is such a high overlap of neurodivergent women that then are, in a way, parasocial with a Jess?
Um, that's a really good question. I think part of it is what you said earlier about wanting to see ourselves reflected. Um, Part of it is the other thing you said, which we will gather more information from Laurie regarding, which is that neurodiversity and fandom, there's a lot of overlap. Um, and I think part of it is also that, as much as in the past, I don't know, 3 years, the phrase parasocial relationship is getting like thrown around all over the place, and usually a denigrating kind of way. Um, we've always had, like, since the invention of celebrity, we've been very
Yes.
interested in what do celebrities do. Oh my God, they're like us, but they're not like us at all because they're so strange and exotic. So we've just gotten to kind of a cultural point where there are so many people who have so many parasocial. I have parasocial relationships
That was going to be my next question.
In the
Yes.
classic way that you described. Vivienne Westwood is a huge one for me. I know she's dead now. But I love everything about her.
Yeah.
I think it's completely insane that towards the end of her life, she would only give interviews if she was granted 30 minutes to rant about climate change. Like, yes, climate change is very important, but like, she's just so odd and so talented and so independent and self-directed and autodidactic and all that kind of stuff. And I love everything about her. Never met the woman. When I met people who met her, I was like, no, I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
I feel that way. And oh, wow, that was going to be a terrible way to phrase that. It sounds really weird to be like, I'm glad Anais Nin is dead. But that's not what I mean by that. But in much the same way, that's how I feel about her, where it's like I wrote my thesis on her diaries, and I, then wrote music based on my research, and then I still like reread her things, and I read so very much about her. In a lot of ways she's very controversial, and in other ways she's not. And it's not because I approve of everything that she has written or done. Like, I think that also that's a fascinating thing about parasociality is that, especially with things like cancel culture, that people are like, oh, I loved this person, but they have performed an infraction. Whole person in the trash. Where you're just like, what?
We're increasingly doing that with like people we actually know.
Yes. Like the whole like cutting out toxic people thing.
Yeah.
Like and this is a rant for, yes. I was like, is it a rant for now? I don't know. But as a therapist, like, of course there are like, once you see a pattern of behavior over and over with someone, you're like, maybe this isn't someone I should be in proximity to. But that's like a repeated thing, as opposed to like the whole phrase, even like I got the ick, where it's like, just because someone has done something once that may have not sat well with you, that doesn't mean that like they're terrible, you're terrible. Like, that doesn't really mean much of anything. It's more of an indicator of like, look for if this is an overriding pattern that either you act in ways that you don't like around this person, or this person is acting in ways that you don't prefer. Yeah.
I've been using got the ick wrong.
You just had a look of mortal terror of like, did I idiom incorrectly?
No, I did idiom incorrectly.
What was happening when you were using the ick? How were you using the ick?
So this was a person that I was dating. We had a little bit of an argument, and then I called back to apologize, and they didn't pick up, and they just ignored me for 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then I broached the subject of, are we going to continue ignoring, or are we going to talk? And they ignored that for another hour and a half. And in that 25 and a half hours, actually 25 hours and 31 minutes, I had all of this time to reflect. And yes. I noticed a pattern that was unappealing, a consistent and very repeated pattern. And it was like, oh, I don't want this. And I thought I had gotten the ick in that, I had sort of had this forced distance by their silence. And then, evaluated, because I've been sick, I haven't been working any more than is like absolutely necessary to keep my company going. And so my brain has a lot of energy. So I was like, okay, so you know, my three of my four main, friend texting people are in the US. And so I just had all morning and early afternoon to like chew, 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 chew.
Oof.
Um, yeah, and it was quite a set of patterns.
Yeah.
And I was like, and now I have the ick. And Ash was like, I literally watched you come down with the ick. Over the course of a day, I watched you develop the ick.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I didn't realize the ick. It sounds like the ick is like more of a kind of a one off, like, oh, this one thing happened, and I was just like, I can't.
I feel like there could be nuance to the ick because I feel like what you're describing, I've experienced as well, where it's like all of a sudden, it's like once I see that pattern and once I see the consistency, it's like I can't, it's like trying to unring a bell. Like I can't
Yeah.
unsee it. And so I can't, like, it's taking up a big portion of my emotional landscape. Like I can't be like, oh, well, that's there, but it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, this has suddenly taken primacy and it's irreversible. Yeah.
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 Which feels different than, and maybe I'm like, there may be like ick variants where, like, for me at least, if someone does something that's like unappealing in a moment, like I might be like, ooh, this is making me like potentially reconsider if I want to be around this person. That gives me a feeling of, but I usually pause and I'm like, okay, was that like a weird one off? Because I also give everyone, I call it the one big oopsie, where like everyone that I date and I'm close friends with gets one big oopsie. Like you get one, like, what was that about? If there's a second big oopsie, that's a bigger conversation, because that might be that we need to redefine the relationship. It might be oh, I don't know if this is for me, or it might be a completely different, unrelated big oopsie, which then that's a special case. But for the
Yeah.
most part, like if you have big oopsied, and I've given you grace for that, and we've worked through it. If you big oopsie again, I'm like, no, that's a pattern. That's twice.
I am actually more generous. For me, the limit is the third, right? The third time I'm like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and also if there's like forward progress, right?
Oh
If it's like a
yeah.
big oopsie and then like the same genre but new, like,
Yes. I gave grace for variation oopsie, or like you were working on it and maybe your big oopsie was like an 8 out of 10 and this one's like a 4. I'm like,
yeah,
okay, okay. I'm like, I see
yeah,
where you're going. I see the progress.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
But also if it's a little oopsie but like 40 times over the space of 6 months, as soon as I recognize it, I'm like, I cannot fucking do this.
yep.
Because also, if it's a little oopsie, I almost certainly have in the moment been like, hey, I don't like that. Hey,
Uh-huh.
it's not okay.
Uh-huh.
And I, some people need a louder amount of feedback on a little oopsie,
That's a good
but
way to put that.
I don't necessarily need to have people close to me that I have to perform a loud amount of feedback to.
Thank you. I love how you put that because I call it performing emotion for that
Mm-hmm.
reason. Where if I say, like, I didn't like that, or I say, I'm uncomfortable, that's exactly what that means. Or if I say, I'm concerned about insert whatever the thing is, and here's why, I'll explain it in that tone of voice. If I have to put on a show for you, I'm already more annoyed, not because the thing bothered me more, but because you didn't like take in what I have said. And now I have to perform a show, and that takes more emotion and more energy. And then now I'm tired.
So much energy. And also it's like, why are they requiring me to show up not as my authentic self? Like, it's like,
Yes.
meet me halfway, man. Like, just
Yes.
just halfway ish.
Just just even part way. Even just give me the
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt. Like, and that's, I mean, thinking about what you were saying about when you open messages from people or when people that you don't know are contacting you, you have no idea how that interaction is going to go. If someone is going to be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, like you can be your authentic self. I take you at face value and we can totally interact that way." Because I don't know if you've had this experience, but the experience I've had is that's not often how that goes. Like,
No, no, and part of it is an allo assumption that there must be subtext, right?
yes.
We must search for the hidden meaning. Part of it is a very gendered difficulty in hearing when women set boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah. And part of it is just most of the communication in the world that is publicly legible is full of people screaming. And when you're not also screaming, I think people are sort of inured. They just kind of like expect, like, oh, if you're upset, you'd be screaming. Um,
Right. Right. And like there's a misread. I find it fascinating that people say that autistics do not read social cues or that we miss social cues, because granted, sometimes I do. But other times I get them extremely clearly and then realize that the other people that I'm interacting with aren't picking up on mine. And I'm like,
yeah,
oh, how interesting. Like I was at a coffee shop with, I'll just call him movie friend, the friend who made the movie. I need to come up. Well, I will use the nickname that we actually worked out for what to do in public when someone is doing, in fact, what I will narrate in the story. His benevolence. Uh, so I was at coffee with his benevolence and was commenting to one of the baristas about the different kinds of beans that they had, the different roasts, the different kinds of coffee that they made there, because I sure like different kinds of go-go bean juice. Um, and it was a great conversation. Like, I was actively enjoying the conversation, and his benevolence was with me conversing. And this guy, by the way, like presupposed that we were a couple. Like, he kept referring to it as like, oh, are you two going to make coffee with these beans? Like, what kind of coffee will you both be making? Like, when you're home, what are you two going to do? Like, he kept basically kind of like bunching us together, and we linguistically kept separating ourselves from each other. And then second barista chimes in and is like, did you know on the packaging that these things here, this description is what happens when you brew the coffee different ways? These are the flavors that come out. And I was like, yes, I'm aware. And he kept going and explaining to me for each package, reading aloud to me the descriptions of the flavors of the coffee. I did not continue this conversation with questions. I was smiling politely. I wasn't frowning at this guy. I also wasn't saying, why are you explaining to me how coffee works, and also how packaging works? I am well aware of how both coffee and packaging, in fact, works. So I was not encouraging of this conversation. And this was not the first time that his benevolence has witnessed this happen to me, where someone is like, oh, yes, you there, strange fey creature. I will tell you my life story or explain things to you, or both. Meanwhile, I'm just like, I'm just existing. I am just trying to get a cup of coffee. I was having a nice chat with the person who was making the espresso, doing a great espresso pull. We were having a good conversation about this. A back and forth, one might say. And so to say that, like, I am the one, in fact, missing social cues, I'm like, well, that's insulting. But the reason why we even came up with the nickname Your Benevolence is that we were trying to figure out a way to indicate, one, to each other that I was stuck in this situation, and two, something that would definitely be so off-putting to most other people that they would probably just stop talking. Because he was like, they're not picking up on any of the social cues you're throwing down. Like, he's just like, you're not running screaming from them, so they're just assuming that you're enjoying what's happening. And I was like, I don't have the energy to run screaming from most people. Like,
I think I'm a pumpkin, and we have about an hour and 20 minutes.
Yep, I was just gonna say, you looked as though the pumpkin was upon you.
It comes on so suddenly.
It was so cute.
Like, I'm alert. I'm alert. I'm alert. I'm a gore.
Boom. Oh my God. Well, I want to include the very end of the story in the episode, but yeah, that is what we did work out. Is it literally? It was like, okay, because I was just like, what do I have to say to indicate like to stop, other than wasting all my energy, like being like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, so yeah, that's how we decided on Your Benevolence, and his response now is Your Worship. And we're like, that is weird enough that most people will probably just stop talking to me. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Neuroprovocateurs. Please join us on Substack, where you can find exclusive clips, resources, and community of the neurospicy variety. We are an independent podcast, so know that your support on Substack and beyond means the world to us, quite literally. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave us 5 stars and glowing reviews, and follow our podcast on your preferred podcast platform so that you can be sure to get each episode the moment it drops, and know that your reviews help us get in front of other people who might also want to listen to this podcast. We are on social media in all of the usual places as Neuroprovocateurs. Thank you again, and excited to see you for our next episode.